Today on Locked On Penguins, Kelsey Surmacz is back on the program. We're going to talk about the state of the team, goaltending in the franchise, and of course, it's Wednesday, so you know that means we're still going to hand out our Warrior helmet as part of Warrior Helmet Wednesday. All that and more on the Locked On Penguins podcast right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody, and welcome back to the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me across all social media platforms at synonym for wet. I have graciously given Hunter Hodes the day off today so he can enjoy some time in DR rather than have to do this show from the balcony of whatever resort he's at right now. We're not going to disclose that. Sorry. But as always, we appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Don't forget that we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. And if you follow us on YouTube, go ahead and hit that notification button so you can be among the first to know when we drop our daily Monday through Friday episodes. And joining the program once again, one of our really good friends, one of the best people working the beat for the Pittsburgh Penguins right now, the one and only Kelsey Surmacz. Kelsey, welcome back to Locked On Penguins.
It's good to be back. Thanks for having me, Pat.
So let's jump right into it because it kind of feels like after Sunday's game against the Senators, there's a little bit of a buzz around the Penguins right now because we know that this is a lost season. We know that they're not going to the Stanley Cup playoffs for the third straight year, and things were a little bit bleak there for a minute, but we got a nice little shot of hope on Sunday when Rutger McGroarty and Villie Koivunen joined the team. For Koivunen, his NHL debut, for McGroarty, a little bit of a return. He played 3 games prior to being sent down to Wilkes-Barre, got his 4th under his belt on Sunday. Hunter and I talked pretty extensively about those two. We were very impressed with both of their games on Sunday. What did you see out of those two? And obviously we're not going to predict their futures, but for a debut and a return, what did you see out of the both of those guys?
Well, yeah, I'll start with McGroarty, actually. So I thought he got better as the game went on. I think the most noticeable improvement is his skating. And you can kind of see his first strides a little bit better. I think there's still some work to be done there, but he did say that he's working a lot on his skating. So I expect that to be something that only improves more. But I just like his instincts are top notch. I mean, you can see that he made a few tough passes, in the offensive zone. He generated a few chances. He had that 2-on-1 with Hayes that he kind of just, missed on that one. So, I was really impressed with him, especially as the game progressed. And it does look like he's taken a few strides, since those first 3 games of the season when he started the season with the Penguins. And then as far as Koivunen, I'll tell you what, that first shift, I mean, he immediately made an impression. I love his puck pursuit game. His forechecking was on display. Again, he has great offensive instincts, and you saw that all night long. So as far as the debut goes, I'd say I was kind of not pleasantly surprised. I don't want to say surprised. I don't think that's the right word. But I think he kind of exceeded my expectations in his debut. He looked like he fit right in. It was pretty seamless.
I can't remember if I brought it up on our Monday episode when we recapped the game. If I did, sorry, listeners, I just got to get into it again. I agree wholeheartedly with the McGroarty part about the skating. Now, he still has a long way to go. He's still, I don't want to say he's not up to NHL speed yet, because that wouldn't be accurate. He certainly looks like he can hang, but he's really got to work on the first step in getting that original initial burst out of there, because we saw it when he had the 2-on-1 with Kevin Hayes. It took him a second to get up to speed, but once he got there, he was right there. He was exactly where he needed to be. And Kevin Hayes fired a rocket of a pass at him, which kind of derailed it, but that happens. The defenseman played it quite well, so Hayes did have to send a bit of a rocket, but you can see that from when he started this season with the big club to where he is now, he has put in the work on his skating. And if that remains the focus of his training over the offseason, through the Calder Cup playoffs and into training camp, I do think this kid is going to have a really golden opportunity to be an NHLer as early as next season. I really liked Koivunen's offensive instincts. I said it to Hunter on the show. He went to the net a lot. And when he got thrust into a power play role early in the game, which, welcome to the NHL, kid, you're on a top power play unit with some future Hall of Famers. Good luck. He planted himself right in front of the net, got a couple chances, and we'll see. I don't want to start, building statues for these kids, but when you have debuts and returns like that, it's very encouraging to see. But overall, though, you have been around this team quite a bit this season for the Hockey News. You've gotten a really good look at them. Do you sense that a lot of these players understand that this is a bit of a transitional season, or is there some disappointment, or is it both inside the locker room right now?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. Obviously, when you have guys in that room like, Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang, Brian Rust, who have been there, done that, they still have this winning culture and this expectation to compete. So I don't think that's ever going to leave the locker room as long as those guys are in it. But I do think to some degree, they also understand where they're at. This isn't a team, like I asked Sid a couple weeks ago, when they were playing pretty well for that stretch. I just said, is this reminiscent of last season? And he told me it's a little bit deeper of a hole to climb out of. So I think they realize where this team's at. I think they realize that there's a bit of a transitional period, but like Kyle Dubas said after the trade deadline, you can't erase that winning culture from the locker room. This can't be something where, losing culture's developed or it becomes the expectation. And honestly, I think this injection of youth here at the end of the season is kind of giving a little bit of energy and new life to this locker room, because they were pretty deflated after that road trip to Florida, and then to Buffalo, where, those were two really poor performances in a row. So they were pretty deflated after that. You could kind of sense the tonal shift in the room once the young guys came up. So I think there's a mix of, still keeping that expectation to win hockey games and to compete, but also just understanding that there's going to be some runway for these guys to develop.
For sure. And it does feel like there was some genuine excitement among those veterans on the team, whether it was Crosby or Brian Rust or Chris Letang, with the three of them speaking pretty glowingly of all of these players and what they potentially could bring to both the organization in the short term and the long term. And it kind of feels like Crosby, not that he hadn't before, we heard a lot of stories about it from the 2016 Stanley Cup run, the 2017 Stanley Cup run, when a lot of these guys came up from Wilkes-Barre. He was ready to be a mentor, but now it really feels like he's truly embracing being that mentor and being that teacher, especially with you had Cody Glass, you've got Philip Tomasino, and now you're going to have these guys. Are you getting kind of that vibe from 87?
Absolutely. I mean, he loves doing this kind of stuff. And I actually mentioned this after practice. I'm trying to remember what day it was. It's kind of a blur. I think it might have been Saturday. So after practice, Sid actually stayed out on the ice with Rutger McGroarty, with Villie Koivunen, and I think Emil Bemstrom hung out there as well. So he took some extra time after practice just to work with those guys a little bit more. He loves this stuff. So I think this is kind of an exciting time for him. And also, too, I mean, don't underscore the value of guys like Brian Rust and Rickard Rakell either, because, something that's kind of unique to this situation that's a little bit different from 2016 is that there's kind of almost like multiple generations of Sid mentees in the room now, because obviously, the first round was Rust and those guys, 2016. Now those guys are also in place to mentor, guys like McGroarty, Koivunen, and Tomasino, all these guys, and they are. And you can kind of see that culture building in the room for some of those younger veterans that were mentored by Sid before. So, I mean, yeah, Sid loves this stuff. He loves mentorship. Rust is the same way. There's a lot of the same characteristics in Rust. I think he directly pulled some of those from 87. So it's kind of a unique time in the locker room, obviously, like I said, transitional period. But I think there's a little bit of excitement surrounding the opportunity to really show these guys the ropes, because it's kind of something that hasn't come up in a good while, especially with legitimate prospects in the system.
Definitely. And Rust is pulling McGroarty aside and going like, did he show you the Stanley Cup winner pictures in his gym? Yeah. He showed those to me too. Of course he did. That's who he is. Let him get it out and we'll be back at the rink in a few hours. But that is going to do it for our first segment. When we come back, we're going to keep the talk about the future going. Kelsey wrote a really good piece, two really good pieces that we're going to dive into actually about collegiate free agents and the future of the goaltending position with the Pittsburgh Penguins. So stick with us. We'll do that when we return. But first, I've got to tell you about today's first sponsor, and that is Wonderful Pistachios. If you're looking for a snack that is both delicious and nutritious, crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios, it is one of the highest protein nuts, and each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber as well as those better for you unsaturated fats, and that'll help you feel fuller for longer. I am a big fan of the no shells variety. I do a lot of driving. I do a lot of sitting down at a desk, and I don't have time to crack open the pistachios. So quick, easy, pop it in snack, and I'm good to go. But there is always that shell option, the classic in shell, if you're looking for that crack. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. That's wonderfulpistachios.com. All right, welcome back to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Penguins. I'm one of the hosts, Patrick Damp, alongside Kelsey Surmacz, one of our good friends of the show. So we might as well get right back into it. Hunter and I had this discussion yesterday about the goaltenders in the organization because Taylor Gauthier, named the ECHL Goaltender of the Week, nearly had 2 full shutout games. Cincinnati, unfortunately, was able to get one past them, but we won't fault them for that. It's a pretty solid weekend. Good weekend to work, if you ask me. But you, Kelsey, had a piece on the Hockey News, which, as I say about you on this show, whether you're on it or not, if you're not following her work on that, you're doing it wrong. Fix your life. Go read her work. Thank you. Now come back to the show. And you had a piece about, obviously everybody's excited about Yoel Blomqvist. Everybody's been following Philip Larson. Of course, there is a massive hype train around Sergei Murashov, but there were 2 other names in your piece about goaltenders in the organization that we maybe don't need to get overly excited about just yet, but we should probably keep our eyes on. Can you tell me a little bit about those 2 goalies?
Yeah, so one of them was actually just signed out of Holy Cross, Thomas Gale. So he was signed to an amateur trial contract with the Wheeling Nailers, and he's only played 1 game so far, 1 goal against, 2.01 goals against average, 941 save percentage. So, pretty good first impression for Thomas Gale. And he was also really good for the Holy Cross Crusaders this season. He was 24-13-2 with a 927 save percentage, 2 shutouts. So I think this is a guy to kind of keep an eye on. I mean, it's never a bad thing to have depth at the goaltending position in the organization. We already know that this organization has a lot of it. And we'll get more to college free agents in a second here, but I think this is a pretty good get for the Penguins as far as organizational depth. He's 24 years old. So like Taylor Gauthier, like all those guys, it's never a bad thing to have these guys in your organization. And then I don't know if you were talking about Gauthier or Castor for the other one, but I can go over a little bit of both. So you mentioned Gauthier, and he's 24. He's kind of been the starting goaltender for the Nailers down there. 13, 10, and 2, 925 save percentage this season. And that's 5th in the ECHL among qualified goaltenders. So, last season he was ECHL goaltender of the year. It seems like he's doing the same kinds of things that he was doing last season. And for a lot of the season too, I mean, he wasn't really the number one, I would say, down there, because Sergei Murashov was for a lot of the season. But, in his starts and ever since he's kind of taken over that role, he hasn't missed a beat. So, again, somebody to keep an eye on. And then as far as Castor, he's a little bit on the older end. I wouldn't say that he's probably a part of the future. He's been struggling a little bit this season, just an 869 save percentage. So I imagine that if Murashov's going to stick at the AHL level, which at this point it's hard to argue him being, in the ECHL, he's definitely earned those AHL minutes. I would imagine that tandem is going to be Gauthier and Gale. So we'll see what happens down the ECHL, but the Penguins have goaltending depth for days. And this is never a bad thing in an organization because their goaltending development is just so volatile. And it's so inconsistent. It's a wild card for a lot of these guys, but they seem to have a couple, legitimate guys knocking on the door.
They really do. I brought it up yesterday where I said, this is a really good position for the organization to be in, especially with what Kyle Dubas wants to do, where he wants to get this youth movement going. He wants to bring in younger players, but also get this team back to playoff contention. And if you've got guys who game out as potential starters or 1Bs at the NHL level, pretty much in both your AHL and ECHL system, obviously I'm putting the cart a little bit ahead of the horse, but you've got to talk about your assets that way when you could potentially move them to help your NHL club. And you look at all of these goaltending prospects, and there's really 2, 3, if you're lucky, spots on a roster to be a goalie. It's not like forward where you've got 12. It's not like defense where you've got 7. There's 2 goalies on a roster. So if you've got this many potential starters, they can really be an asset for you, coupled with the amount of draft picks that this team has over the next few years. So that could, either way, you have a potential starter that comes around over the next couple of years, or you've got somebody who can put a little extra juice into this rebuild. But moving it right along here, Hunter and I discussed this. The Penguins signed Nolan Renwick to an ATO the other day for the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, signed him out of Maine. He's going to join the team as they head down the stretch towards the Calder Cup playoffs. But another piece, which I'm just going to keep throwing the praise on because you're absolutely crushing it, that you wrote for the Hockey News yesterday, 5 NCAA free agents that you think the Penguins should target. And there's a lot of really good names in there. There's also one that I was reading about this morning, was not on your list, so I'd like to see what you think, if you have thoughts on them, is the Penguins are apparently also interested in Dalton Bancroft, son of Steve Bancroft, former NHLer, outside of Cornell. So a lot of good options here, and we've seen the Penguins throughout their history, especially in this era, really thrive with collegiate free agents.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a strength for them for a long time. I mean, I know this wasn't the Penguins organization's signing, but if you remember, Chris Kunitz was a free agent. So, I mean, there are some legitimate, I think the NCAA pool in general is a lot stronger than it was in years past. There's some legitimate free agents coming out of the NCAA now, and a lot of credit to the USHL program too, because that's growing like crazy. So, I mean, just a couple of these guys that I talked about. Obviously, the big fish. I mean, TJ Hughes is the big one. And I think the interesting thing here, so first of all, he's, just in case you're not familiar, He played at the University of Michigan this season, registered 47 goals, 122 points, and 116 total games with the Wolverines. And he was over point per game this season, 15 goals, 38 points, 36 games. And he also played 2 seasons with Rutger McGroarty, so there's a little bit of a connection there to the Penguins organization. Doesn't mean anything necessarily, but I do think this is probably a pretty safe option in terms of, college free agency, just because I think he is a more proven player. His tool set's more ready. He's probably somebody you can sign and maybe hope to see at the NHL level at some point next season. And there's a couple wild cards out there too. Riley Thompson, he's a center for Ohio State. I think Carter King's a little older. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's about to turn 24. So University of Denver, 2-time national champion there. But the one I'm kind of intrigued by is CJ Foley. He's a right defenseman for Dartmouth. And if I had to guess, I think he's probably going to, go back to Dartmouth next season just for more development. He's only in his sophomore season. So I think this is a guy that's going to get a little bit more development, but he's definitely a dynamic blue liner. I mean, he was 8th overall in NCAA scoring among defensemen this season. He had 30 points in 33 games. He was first in even strength points per game. So this is a guy, pretty much every defenseman kind of around him, in the points race and just a lot of the stats rankings have already either been drafted or were signed to ELCs. So I think he's a guy to keep an eye on in the next year or so, even if, there's he goes back to the NCAA next year. But all in all, I mean, the NCAA prospect pool is something the Penguins should definitely be dipping into, especially if they're looking to accelerate this rebuild, because I think there's some hidden finds here. And we didn't even mention Quinn Hudson either. So, there's a couple good ones. And if Dubas has indicated anything, I think he wants this rebuild to take as quick as possible. So, dabbling in anything they can, whether that's the NCAA free agency, restricted free agency, the trade market, regular free agency, I think everything's going to be in play this year.
It absolutely has to be, because you beat me to the punch on that. Great minds and all of that. But if there needs to be no stone left unturned for this, because I don't want this to come off as critical against Kyle Dubas, because I have been, ever since he basically admitted his mistake after his first offseason, since the Jake Gensel trade to now, I think he has been batting damn near 1,000. But when he has kind of painted himself into a little bit of a corner here by saying, oh, I want to get this team back to some kind of a contender status before Sidney Crosby retires, he's going to have to try every single thing, whether it's offer sheets, collegiate free agents, if it's drafting, if it's trades, if it's signings. So this is going to be a really, I don't want to say a critical offseason for Kyle Dubas, because we're all well aware that this is going to take a little bit longer and next season is probably going to be a little bit more of the same. But there needs to be moves made this summer where you really start to see it. And to kind of bring this full circle, when I was reading your piece on the collegiate free agents, I was reading it as everybody else. I'm just scrolling right down it, and I go, I wonder if she is going to bring up CJ Foley, because listeners of this show know I'm not a prospect guy. Like, I wish I was. I just don't have enough hours in the day to commit to it. But I had been seeing highlights of Foley for quite a few months, and I was like, how has this kid not been drafted? Like, how is he not already property of an NHL team? And if the Penguins and Kyle Dubas can get their hands on him and his development goes the way it should go, this kid could really be special.
Absolutely. And you think about this, prospect pool of defensive prospects they've built. I mean, there's some legitimate talent on the blue line in their system. And just like goaltenders, I mean, defensive depth is never a bad thing. Defensemen tend to take a lot longer to develop. Again, the development process is volatile. Like there's just a lot of things that go into it. And there's also a lot of cases where defensemen kind of develop in unexpected ways too. I think in a lot of ways, Foley reminds me a little bit of Harrison Brunick. He's a pretty smooth skater. He's got great offensive instincts. I think one big difference between those two in particular, I think Foley does need to work on a lot of the defensive details. I think those are some things that Brunick has a little bit more ironed out. But you think about this prospect pool they have at defense. They've got Brunick. They've got Pianiniemi, they've got Pickering, they've got Harding. They have some guys that have the potential to be impact guys at the NHL level. Brunick has top 4 potential, Pickering has top 4 potential. If they can just add to that and get as many of these guys in the system as possible, I mean, you look at these last couple seasons, the blue line's been the biggest area of concern. So that and goaltending. And guess what? They have both of those prospects, pretty well accounted for in their system. So, I think this draft will be telling too, what they decide to do here. I think they're probably going to try to go after a center. But getting some of these guys like Foley is only going to help them and build that prospect pool out. So they have a little bit more margin for error in terms of development with these prospects.
100%. And you said it, the 2 biggest Achilles heels of these last 2 seasons have been the guy between the pipes and the guys directly in front of the guy between the pipes. So they've seemed to understood these are the needs that most certainly need addressed, and they've been doing a pretty good job of it. But that will do it for our middle segment. When we come back, just because I was so gracious and gave Hunter the day off doesn't mean that Warrior Helmet Wednesday is taking the day off. We are going to give our MVP of the week. It seems like it's probably a pretty obvious candidate, but you should stay tuned just to make sure it is that obvious candidate. Kelsey and I will do that in the final segment when we return right after this. So stick with us for that. But first, got to tell you about today's last sponsor, and that is Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where'd all my money go? I certainly have. Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, and everything else, it's very easy to lose track. And that is where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money, it's not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you stop simply managing your money and start building your wealth. The all-in-one convenience, that's the thing that does it for me. Instead of switching between my banking app, my credit card app, and whatever apps I'm using to help my not very great at math brain do the math, I can use Monarch Money to check my finances, track my spending, and plan my long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, welcome back. It's the Wednesday edition of Locked On Penguins. I'm Patrick Damp. Hunter Hodes is on vacation for the day. So joining me is one of the best in the business, Kelsey Surmacz. And it is Wednesday, which that means it's time for us to give out our weekly MVP award in what we refer to as Warrior Helmet Wednesday. If you are new to the show, this is us paying homage to the 2016 Stanley Cup winning Pittsburgh Penguins, who would give out their MVP of the game in the locker room via a Warrior helmet. So we pick our MVP of the week in honor of that by calling it Warrior Helmet Wednesday. And we've got a pretty obvious one to give out this week, because how could you not give it, at least for me? Maybe Kelsey's got another one. That's the fun part of Warrior Helmet Wednesday. Doesn't have to be unanimous. Is the captain, Sidney Crosby, breaks Wayne Gretzky's record with his 20th point per game season after scoring a pretty nice goal against the Buffalo Sabres, despite the Penguins getting their doors blown off by the Buffalo Sabres of all teams. But obviously that was the highlight of the week. He then follows it up with an overtime winner in a 1-0 win against the Ottawa Senators. So big week for the captain, historic week for the captain, and he just continues chugging along at age 37.
Yeah, I mean, what else can you say? It's pretty incredible what Sidney Crosby is still doing at 37 years old. I mean, I know, number 8's getting a lot of talk, rightfully so. And it's amazing that we've gotten to witness two generational talents, in the same age of hockey. They're both breaking Gretzky records. And as far as Sid, too, I mean, just in terms of the present, I mean, he's on a 10-game point streak. That's the longest active streak in the NHL. 8 goals, 15 points in his last 10 games. There's no signs of slowing down for this guy. I know it seems like it's the same story every year. We just keep talking about this. And when is Father Time finally going to catch Sidney Crosby? Look, he's at 20 point per game seasons. I wouldn't be surprised to see that turn into 21, 22, maybe even 23. It's remarkable how he continues to find ways to evolve his game in order to stay on top of his game, because he just finds new ways to reinvent himself and just, stay productive and remain one of the best. So he's also third in 5-on-5 points this year, which that's a crazy stat to me. You think of all these other guys in the league, and even the fact that the Penguins' power play has been much improved this year. Just awesome stuff from 87. And again, what else can you say? That's the one record I think everybody was just waiting on him to break. He's got it, and we'll see how much he can build on it after this season too.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, as much as I want to see, and I think we all want to see the Penguins get back to contention, get back to the playoffs. If nothing else, I'm fully in my appreciate Sidney Crosby era, because if the Penguins are terrible for however much longer his career lasts, but he continues to perform like this, there's a part of me that goes, you know what? Whatever. Like, I just want to see him defy the aging curve. I want to see him give a middle finger to actuaries and just continue to be an absolutely elite talent. So pretty obvious Warrior helmet for this Wednesday. Before we wrap it up, Kelsey, floor is yours. Tell everybody where they can find you, what you're working on, anything you want to plug. The floor is entirely yours.
Yeah, so you can read my stuff on the Hockey News Penguins website. I publish there a couple of times a day. So obviously we'll be following the young guys pretty closely for the rest of the season. And, some interesting pending UFA, RFA stuff going into the off season. So find my work there. You can also follow me on all socials at Kelsey Surmacz 4 _ between the Kelsey and Surmacz, depending on the platform. So yeah, guys, thanks for following along. And Pat, thanks for having me again. I really appreciate it.
Kelsey, it is never difficult having you on this program. You're like I said, you're one of the best people on the beat right now. Your work needs to get even bigger because you're doing one hell of a job. We love having you on the show. And that is going to do it for our Wednesday edition for Kelsey Surmacz. I'm Patrick Damp. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. We will have a brand new Locked On Penguins on Thursday to preview a game against the NHL's hottest team, the St. Louis Blues. So join us for that on Thursday. Thank you as always, and we will talk to you once again on Thursday.